This is a Typhoon-class submarine. At 175 meters long and weighing 48,000 tons submerged, it's the largest submarine ever built. Its twin nuclear reactors generate 380 megawatts of power. Its 20 R-39 ballistic missiles can strike targets 10,000 kilometers away. Each missile carries 10 nuclear warheads. During the Cold War, a single Typhoon could destroy an entire continent. Today, we'll explore the complete evolution of nuclear submarines, from the pioneering USS Nautilus to the massive Typhoon giants. How these underwater fortresses work, what makes them so lethal, who designed them, and why they changed naval warfare forever. We'll dive deep into their nuclear reactors, ballistic missile systems, torpedo armament, and stealth technology. This is the complete story of humanity's most powerful underwater weapons. Chapter 1. The Birth of Underwater Warfare. The dream of fighting underwater began 400 years ago with a Dutch inventor and a leather-covered rowboat. But how did humanity's fascination with underwater travel evolve from Renaissance experiments to nuclear-powered leviathans? Who were the visionary inventors who first imagined vessels that could operate beneath the waves? What drove men to risk their lives in crude underwater contraptions that seemed more like coffins than weapons? The story begins in 1620, when Cornelis van Drebbel, a Dutch inventor working for King James I of England, built the world's first navigable submarine. Drebbel was an alchemist, engineer, and glassworker whose curiosity about the natural world led him to experiment with underwater navigation. His submarine was essentially a reinforced rowboat covered with greased leather. The craft was 12 feet long and could carry 12 oarsmen plus passengers. Drebbel's innovation was a system of bladders and tubes that allowed the submarine to submerge by taking on water and surface by expelling it. The crew breathed air from leather bags, supplemented by a mysterious chemical process that Drebbel claimed could purify the air. On a demonstration in 1624, Drebbel's submarine traveled underwater from Westminster to Greenwich along the Thames River. King James himself reportedly took a ride in the submarine, making him possibly the first head of state to travel underwater. But Drebbel's submarine was more curiosity than weapon. It had no armament and limited practical application. The Royal Navy showed little interest in the invention, and Drebbel's submarine remained a technological dead end. Yet he had proven that humans could survive and navigate underwater, establishing the fundamental concept that would drive submarine development for centuries. 60 years later, Italian physicist Giovanni Alfonso Borelli advanced submarine theory significantly. In his 1680 work, De Motu Animalium, Borelli described a self-contained underwater breathing apparatus and a submarine design that incorporated ballast tanks for controlled diving and surfacing. Borelli's submarine featured a double hull with water ballast chambers between the inner and outer shells. The crew would flood these chambers to submerge and pump them out to surface. His design included a snorkel-like breathing tube and a primitive air purification system using sponges soaked in oil. Most remarkably, Borelli envisioned a propulsion system using oars that extended through watertight seals in the hull. Though never built, Borelli's designs were centuries ahead of their time. His ballast tank concept would become standard in all future submarines. His understanding of buoyancy, control, and air management demonstrated sophisticated engineering thinking that wouldn't be fully implemented until the 19th century. The American Revolution saw the first combat use of a submarine. David Bushnell's Turtle, built in 1775, was designed specifically as a weapon of war. The egg-shaped vessel could hold one operator who controlled depth, direction, and the attachment of explosive charges to enemy ships. Sergeant Ezra Lee piloted the Turtle in its famous attack on HMS Eagle in New York Harbor on September 7, 1776. Though the mission failed when the explosive charge couldn't penetrate the ship's copper-sheathed hull, the Turtle demonstrated that submarines could approach enemy vessels undetected. Robert Fulton, better known for his steamboat, designed several submarines in the early 1800s. His Nautilus, built for the French Navy in 1800, was 21 feet long. and could carry a crew of 3. The submarine used a hand-cranked propeller for underwater propulsion and a collapsible sail for surface travel. Fulton's submarine could dive to 25 feet and remain submerged for several hours. Like Bushnell's Turtle, it was designed to attach explosive charges to enemy vessels. Fulton demonstrated his submarine's capabilities by sinking several target ships, but Napoleon showed little interest in submarine warfare. The American Civil War marked the first successful submarine attack in history. The Confederate submarine, H.L. Hunley sank the Union warship USS Housatonic in Charleston Harbor on February 17, 1864. The Hunley was hand-powered by 8 crew members turning a crankshaft connected to a propeller. The attack was successful but costly. The Hunley sank with all hands after the explosion. The submarine had demonstrated that underwater weapons could sink major warships, but the technology remained primitive and extremely dangerous for the crews. Spanish naval officer Isaac Peral revolutionized submarine design with his electric-powered submarine launched in 1888. The Peral was the first submarine to use electric motors for propulsion, eliminating the exhausting hand cranking required by earlier designs. Peral's submarine was 77 feet long and displaced 85 tons. Its electric motor could propel the boat at 8 knots on the surface and 6 knots submerged. The submarine carried a crew of 12 and was armed with 3 torpedo tubes. Most importantly, it could remain submerged for several hours without exhausting its crew. The Peral conducted successful trials, diving to depths of 30 feet and demonstrating remarkable maneuverability. But the Spanish Navy rejected the design, claiming it was too advanced for practical use. Peral's submarine was decommissioned after only a few years, but it had established electric propulsion as the future of submarine technology. French submarine designer Gustave Zédé built several successful submarines in the 1880s and 90s. His Gymnote, launched in 1888, was the first submarine to use a periscope for underwater observation. The submarine's electric motor and advanced ballast system made it far more practical than previous designs. The Gymnote conducted over 2,000 dives during its operational career, demonstrating the reliability of electric submarine propulsion. Zédé's designs influenced submarine development throughout Europe and established France as a leader in underwater warfare technology. By 1900, submarine technology had advanced sufficiently for major navies to take notice. The U.S. Navy commissioned its first submarine, USS Holland, on October 12, 1900. Designed by Irish immigrant John Philip Holland, it used a gasoline engine for surface travel and electric motors when submerged. Holland was 53 feet long and displaced 64 tons. Its dual propulsion system allowed extended surface operations while maintaining underwater capability. The submarine was armed with a single torpedo tube and could dive to 75 feet. Though small by later standards, Holland proved that submarines could be practical military weapons. The early 1900s saw rapid submarine development as European powers prepared for war. Germany, France, Britain, and Russia all began building submarine fleets. These early boats were still primitive, limited underwater endurance, slow submerged speed, and dangerous operating conditions. But the concept was proven. Submarines could approach enemy vessels undetected, launch devastating attacks, and escape before retaliation. The stage was set for submarine warfare to revolutionize naval combat. World War I would demonstrate the strategic potential of submarine warfare. German U-boats would sink thousands of Allied vessels, proving that submarines could influence the outcome of global conflicts. The diesel-electric propulsion system would become standard, providing the reliability and endurance needed for extended operations. Yet even the most advanced World War I submarines had critical limitations. They could only remain submerged for a few hours before battery power was exhausted. They needed to surface regularly to run diesel engines and recharge batteries. Their underwater speed was limited to about 8 knots, making them vulnerable to fast destroyers. The dream of a true submarine, a vessel that could operate underwater indefinitely at high speed, remained elusive. Conventional propulsion had reached its limits. To create the ultimate underwater weapon, a revolutionary power source was needed. That revolution would come from the atom itself. Chapter 2: The Nuclear Revolution. Captain Hyman Rickover was not a man who accepted limitations. The Polish-born engineer had joined the U.S. Navy's nuclear program in 1946 with a singular obsession: building the world's first nuclear-powered submarine. But how do you convince skeptical admirals that an untested technology could revolutionize naval warfare? How do you engineer a nuclear reactor small enough to fit inside a submarine hull yet powerful enough to propel it at unprecedented speeds? Rickover's vision was audacious. While conventional submarines were prisoners of their air supply, a nuclear submarine would have unlimited underwater endurance. While diesel boats crawled at 8 knots submerged, a nuclear submarine would cruise at over 20 knots indefinitely. While conventional submarines were forced to surface regularly, making them vulnerable to enemy detection, a nuclear submarine could remain hidden beneath the waves for months. The engineering challenges were staggering. Nuclear reactors in 1948 were massive installations requiring enormous concrete containment structures. Rickover needed to shrink this technology into a space smaller than a school bus while maintaining absolute safety. The reactor had to operate reliably in the violent motion of a submarine, withstand depth charges and torpedo impacts, and function flawlessly for years without maintenance. The STU-W reactor that Rickover's team developed was a masterpiece of compact engineering. The pressurized water reactor used enriched uranium fuel to heat water in a primary cooling loop. This superheated water transferred its energy to a secondary steam loop, which drove turbines connected to the submarine's propeller shaft. The entire system was contained within a heavily shielded compartment that protected the crew from radiation. Construction of USS Nautilus began at Electric Boat in Groton, Connecticut on June 14, 1952. President Harry Truman himself laid the keel, recognizing the historic significance of the project. The submarine's hull was built from HY-80 steel, a high-yield strength alloy that could withstand the enormous pressures of deep diving while containing the nuclear reactor's energy. On January 21, 1954, USS Nautilus was launched. First Lady Mamie Eisenhower christened the submarine with the traditional bottle of champagne. But the real test came 9 months later when Nautilus first went to sea under nuclear power. Commander Eugene Wilkinson, Nautilus's first commanding officer, had been personally selected by Rickover. On January 17, 1955, Nautilus cast off from her pier at Groton. As the submarine cleared the harbor, Wilkinson transmitted the historic message: underway on nuclear power. The performance was revolutionary. Nautilus could maintain 23 knots, submerged indefinitely. She could dive to depths exceeding 700 feet. Most importantly, she could remain submerged for weeks without surfacing. The strategic implications were staggering. On August 3, 1958, Nautilus reached the geographic North Pole, traveling beneath the polar ice cap. Commander William Anderson announced to the crew, "For the world, our country, and the Navy, the North Pole." The submarine had traveled 1,830 nautical miles under ice, proving that nuclear submarines could operate anywhere in the world's oceans. President Eisenhower personally congratulated Anderson and his crew, awarding them the Presidential Unit Citation. Nautilus had demonstrated that nuclear propulsion was not only feasible but revolutionary. The U.S. Navy immediately began construction of additional nuclear submarines, each incorporating lessons learned from Nautilus's operations. But nuclear propulsion was only the first revolution. The next would transform submarines from hunters into strategic weapons capable of destroying entire nations. Chapter 3: The Ballistic Missile Revolution. The year was 1957, and America faced an existential threat. The Soviet Union had just launched Sputnik, demonstrating intercontinental ballistic missile capability. Soviet ICBMs could strike American cities from launch sites thousands of miles away. But how could America respond? Land-based missiles were vulnerable to first strikes. Bombers could be shot down. The United States needed a nuclear deterrent that was virtually invulnerable to enemy attack. The answer lay beneath the waves. Admiral Arleigh Burke envisioned submarines armed with ballistic missiles. These underwater platforms would be nearly impossible to detect and destroy. They could patrol vast ocean areas, making them invulnerable to preemptive strikes. Most importantly, they could launch nuclear missiles from positions close to enemy territory. The Polaris missile program tackled unprecedented engineering challenges. The Polaris A-1 was a solid-fuel ballistic missile specifically designed for submarine launch. At 28 feet long and weighing 28,000 pounds, it could deliver a nuclear warhead over 1,200 nautical miles. The first ballistic missile submarine, USS George Washington, was created by cutting the hull of USS Scorpion and inserting a 130-foot missile compartment. This compartment housed 16 Polaris missiles in individual launch tubes. The modification transformed an attack submarine into a strategic weapon platform. George Washington was commissioned on December 30, 1959. The submarine was 381 feet long and displaced 6,700 tons submerged. Her S-5W nuclear reactor provided the power needed for extended patrols in remote ocean areas. The first deterrent patrol began on November 15, 1960. George Washington submerged off the coast of Connecticut and disappeared into the Atlantic Ocean. For the next 66 days, she patrolled submerged, maintaining radio contact with naval headquarters while remaining undetected by Soviet forces. The psychological impact was enormous. Soviet leaders knew that American ballistic missile submarines were somewhere in the world's oceans, but they had no way to locate or track them. Each submarine carried enough nuclear firepower to destroy multiple Soviet cities. The success led to rapid expansion of the ballistic missile submarine fleet. The George Washington class included 5 submarines. The Ethan Allen class followed with 5 more boats. The Lafayette class added 31 submarines, creating a fleet of 41 ballistic missile submarines by 1967. Each submarine represented a quantum leap in destructive capability. The Polaris A-3 missile could strike targets within half a nautical mile at maximum range. The Poseidon missile carried multiple independently targeted warheads. The Trident missile had a range of over 4,000 nautical miles and unprecedented accuracy. Ballistic missile submarines created a nuclear deterrent that was virtually invulnerable to first strike. Unlike land-based missiles or bombers, submarines could not be targeted preemptively. They provided assured retaliation capability that made nuclear war unwinnable for any aggressor. But while ballistic missile submarines provided strategic deterrence, the Soviets were developing their own underwater nuclear capabilities. Chapter 4. Soviet Nuclear Response. In the depths of the Barents Sea, a new kind of submarine was taking shape. Soviet engineers had studied every detail of USS Nautilus, analyzing intelligence reports and captured technology. But how could the Soviet Union, devastated by World War II and lacking America's industrial base, compete in the nuclear submarine race? How could they match the technological sophistication of Rickover's nuclear navy? The answer lay in Soviet determination and a willingness to accept risks that would terrify Western engineers. The Soviet nuclear submarine program began in 1952 under Vladimir Peregudov and Anatoly Alexandrov. Unlike the methodical American approach, Soviet development was characterized by urgency and improvisation. Stalin had ordered nuclear submarines to be built as quickly as possible, regardless of cost or safety considerations. The first Soviet nuclear submarine, K-3, was laid down in 1954 at the Severodvinsk shipyard. Designated November class by NATO, these submarines were crude compared to American designs, but represented a remarkable achievement for a nation still recovering from devastating war. The November-class submarines were powered by 2 VMA reactors, each generating 70 megawatts of thermal power. The submarines were 360 feet long and displaced 4,700 tons submerged. Their maximum speed was 30 knots, faster than any American submarine of the era. But speed came at a terrible cost. Soviet nuclear reactors were notoriously unreliable and dangerous. The VMA reactor used a liquid metal coolant that was highly corrosive and toxic. Radiation shielding was inadequate by Western standards. Crew members routinely received radiation doses that would be considered lethal in American submarines. Captain First Rank Leonid Osipenko commanded K-3 during her sea trials in 1958. His crew faced challenges that American submariners could barely imagine. Reactor coolant leaks were common. Radiation alarms sounded constantly. The submarine's nuclear compartment was so contaminated that crew members could only enter for brief periods. Despite these problems, K3 achieved remarkable performance. On July 4, 1962, she reached the North Pole, becoming the first Soviet submarine to achieve this milestone. The achievement demonstrated that Soviet nuclear submarines, despite their flaws, could operate in the most challenging environments on Earth. The November class was followed by the Hotel-class ballistic missile submarines. These boats carried 3 R-13 ballistic missiles in the sail, giving the Soviet Union its first sea-based nuclear deterrent. The missiles had a range of only 600 kilometers, requiring the submarines to operate close to enemy territory. Soviet submarine construction accelerated throughout the 1960s. The Echo-class cruise missile submarines carried 6 P-5 missiles designed to attack American aircraft carriers. The Victor-class attack submarines introduced advanced sonar systems and improved reactor designs. The Charlie-class submarines combined cruise missiles with attack capabilities. But Soviet submarines suffered from fundamental design flaws. Reactor reliability remained poor. Radiation exposure was endemic. Most critically, Soviet submarines were much noisier than their American counterparts, making them easier to detect and track. American sonar operators learned to identify individual Soviet submarines by their unique acoustic signatures. Each boat had distinctive sounds from its reactor, propulsion system, and auxiliary equipment. This acoustic intelligence allowed American submarines to track Soviet boats across entire ocean basins. The most ambitious Soviet submarine was the Papa-class K-162. This experimental boat was designed to test advanced technologies including titanium hull construction and liquid metal reactor cooling. At 35 knots submerged, she was the fastest submarine ever built. But the experimental systems proved unreliable, and only one Papa-class submarine was completed. Soviet submarine crews faced dangers that their American counterparts rarely encountered. Reactor accidents were common. In 1961, K-19 suffered a reactor coolant leak that exposed the entire crew to lethal radiation. 8 crew members died from radiation poisoning. Despite these tragedies, Soviet submarine development continued. The Alpha-class submarines used titanium hulls and liquid metal reactors to achieve unprecedented performance. These boats could dive to 3,000 feet and reach 45 knots submerged. But they were extremely expensive and difficult to maintain. The pinnacle of Soviet submarine technology was the Typhoon class. At 175 meters long and weighing 48,000 tons submerged, they dwarfed any American submarine. Each Typhoon carried 20 R-39 ballistic missiles with a range of 8,300 kilometers. But while the Soviets built submarines that were fast and heavily armed, the Americans were perfecting a different approach, the Silent Hunter. Chapter 5. Attack Submarines. In the black depths of the Pacific Ocean, USS Seawolf was stalking her prey. The year was 1986, and the Cold War was at its peak. Soviet submarines were crossing the Pacific carrying nuclear weapons and intelligence-gathering equipment. But how do you track an enemy submarine in an ocean covering 64 million square miles? How do you remain undetected while hunting the most advanced underwater weapons ever built? The answer lay in a new generation of American attack submarines designed for one purpose: finding and destroying enemy submarines before they could complete their missions. The Los Angeles-class submarines represented the pinnacle of Cold War submarine technology. At 360 feet long and displacing 6,900 tons submerged, they were larger and more capable than any previous attack submarine. Their S-6G nuclear reactor generated 165 megawatts of thermal power, driving the submarine at over 33 knots submerged. But speed was secondary to stealth. Los Angeles-class submarines were designed to be acoustic ghosts, virtually undetectable even by the most sophisticated sonar systems. Every component was engineered to minimize noise. The reactor cooling pumps used advanced bearings and vibration isolation. The propeller was precisely machined to eliminate cavitation. The hull was covered with anechoic tiles that absorbed sonar pulses. Commander Daniel Wolkensdorfer commanded USS Los Angeles during her first patrol in 1976. His mission was to demonstrate that American submarines could track Soviet boats without being detected themselves. The challenge was enormous. Soviet submarines were becoming quieter and more sophisticated with each generation. The key to submarine warfare was sonar technology. The AN/BQQ-5 sonar system was the most advanced underwater detection system ever built. Passive sonar arrays could detect submarine signatures at ranges exceeding 100 nautical miles. Towed array sonars extended this range even further. The Mark 48 torpedo was the primary weapon of American attack submarines. This wire-guided torpedo could travel at 55 knots and had a range of 38 kilometers. Its 650-pound warhead could sink any submarine or surface ship. Most importantly, the torpedo could be guided to target by the launching submarine. Lieutenant Commander John Paget served as weapons officer aboard USS Dallas during a classified mission in 1983. His submarine was tasked with tracking a Soviet Yankee-class ballistic missile submarine as it transited from the Barents Sea to patrol areas in the Atlantic. The cat-and-mouse game lasted for 3 weeks. Dallas maintained contact with the Soviet submarine using passive sonar, staying far enough away to avoid detection while close enough to track the target's movements. The Soviet submarine changed course frequently, attempting to shake any potential followers. The mission demonstrated the effectiveness of American attack submarines in their primary role: strategic surveillance and anti-submarine warfare. Los Angeles-class submarines could track Soviet ballistic missile submarines from the moment they left port until they returned. Attack submarines also performed intelligence-gathering missions that would have been impossible for any other platform. USS Parche conducted covert operations that remain classified decades later. These missions involved placing listening devices on underwater cables and recovering Soviet equipment from the ocean floor. The most famous intelligence mission was Operation Ivy Bells, conducted by USS Halibut in the 1970s. The submarine placed listening devices on Soviet underwater communication cables in the Sea of Okhotsk. These devices recorded Soviet naval communications for years, but attack submarines faced increasingly sophisticated opposition. Soviet submarines were becoming quieter and more capable with each generation. The Victor III-class submarines were significantly quieter than earlier Soviet designs. The Akula-class submarines approached American noise levels for the first time. American submarine designers responded with even more advanced designs. The Seawolf-class submarines represented the ultimate expression of Cold War submarine technology. These boats were larger, faster, and quieter than any previous design. Their S6W reactor generated 45 megawatts of electrical power. USS Seawolf was 353 feet long and displaced 9,100 tons submerged. Her maximum speed exceeded 35 knots. But her most impressive characteristic was her acoustic signature. Seawolf was quieter at 25 knots than Los Angeles-class submarines were at pierside. The submarine's sonar systems were equally revolutionary. The AN/BSY-2 combat system integrated sonar, fire control, and navigation into a single system. The spherical sonar array contained over 1,000 individual hydrophones. Towed array sonars could detect submarine signatures at ranges exceeding 200 nautical miles. Captain Darrell Caudle commanded USS Seawolf during her first operational deployment in 1998. The submarine's mission was to demonstrate American technological superiority in the post-Cold War era. Seawolf conducted exercises with Allied navies and participated in intelligence-gathering operations. The end of the Cold War changed the mission of attack submarines. Instead of tracking Soviet ballistic missile submarines, they focused on regional conflicts and anti-terrorism operations. Attack submarines launched Tomahawk cruise missiles during conflicts in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Libya. The Virginia-class submarines represented a new generation designed for post-Cold War missions. These boats incorporated lessons learned from decades of submarine warfare while adding new capabilities for littoral operations and special forces support. Virginia-class submarines are 377 feet long and displace 7,800 tons submerged. Their S-9G reactor generates 134 megawatts of thermal power while maintaining acoustic stealth. Advanced sonar systems provide 360-degree coverage. The submarine's weapons systems reflect changing mission requirements. 12 vertical launch tubes can carry Tomahawk cruise missiles for land attack missions. 4 torpedo tubes launch Mark 48 torpedoes and other weapons. Advanced mine-laying capabilities allow covert mining operations. Perhaps most importantly, Virginia-class submarines can support special operations forces. A dry deck shelter can be attached to the submarine's hull, allowing Navy SEALs to launch and recover while the submarine remains submerged. Advanced communication systems provide real-time coordination. Modern attack submarines represent the culmination of over 70 years of nuclear submarine development. They combine stealth, speed, and firepower in platforms that can operate anywhere in the world's oceans. Their crews are among the most highly trained in any military service. But while American attack submarines perfected the art of stealth, the Soviets were building submarines that prioritized raw power and intimidation. Chapter 6. The Typhoon Giants. Deep beneath the Arctic ice, something massive was moving. American sonar operators had never detected anything like it. The acoustic signature was enormous, larger than any submarine they had ever tracked. The contact was moving at 27 knots, faster than most surface ships. But how could something so large move so quickly underwater? What kind of submarine could generate such a massive sonar signature? The answer would redefine the limits of submarine construction and strategic nuclear warfare. Project 941, designated Typhoon class by NATO, represented the Soviet Union's most ambitious submarine program. These underwater leviathans were designed around a single requirement: carry the massive R-39 ballistic missile that was too large for any conventional submarine design. The R-39 missile was a monster. At 16 meters long and weighing 84 tons, it was larger than most intercontinental ballistic missiles. The missile could carry 10 nuclear warheads over a range of 8,300 kilometers. But its size created an unprecedented engineering challenge. Chief designer Sergei Kovalev created a revolutionary solution. Instead of a single pressure hull, the Typhoon would have 2 parallel hulls connected by a superstructure. The missile compartment would be located between the hulls, allowing the enormous missiles to be accommodated without compromising structural integrity. The design was audacious. At 175 meters long and 23 meters wide, the Typhoon would be larger than most surface warships. Submerged displacement would reach 48,000 tons, larger than many World War II battleships. Construction of the first Typhoon, TK-208, began at Severodvinsk in 1976. The submarine size created unprecedented challenges for the shipyard. New construction facilities had to be built to accommodate the massive hull sections. Specialized cranes were installed to handle components weighing hundreds of tons. Captain First Rank Yuri Sysoyev was selected to command TK-208 during her sea trials. A veteran submarine officer with over 20 years of experience, Sysoyev had commanded nuclear submarines throughout his career, but nothing had prepared him for the Typhoon's overwhelming size and complexity. The submarine's reactor compartment housed 2 OK-650 pressurized water reactors, each generating 190 megawatts of thermal power. The reactors were located in separate compartments within each pressure hull, providing redundancy and damage resistance. The missile compartment was the Typhoon's most impressive feature. 20 launch tubes, each 20 meters tall, dominated the center section of the submarine. The tubes were arranged in 2 rows of 10, with each tube capable of housing an R-39 missile ready for immediate launch. Each R-39 missile was a technological marvel. The 3-stage solid-fuel rocket could accelerate 10 nuclear warheads to speeds exceeding 20,000 kilometers per hour. The warheads could be targeted independently, allowing a single missile to destroy multiple cities. But the Typhoon's most remarkable feature was its crew accommodations. Unlike the cramped conditions typical of submarines, the Typhoon provided spacious living quarters for its 160 crew members. The submarine included a swimming pool, sauna, gymnasium, and library. The first Typhoon was launched on September 23, 1980. The submarine's size was overwhelming. dwarfing every other vessel in the shipyard. Western intelligence agencies struggled to understand the purpose of such a massive submarine. Sea trials revealed the Typhoon's impressive capabilities. The submarine could dive to 400 meters, deeper than most attack submarines. Its massive size provided exceptional stability in rough seas. The twin-hull design offered redundancy that made the submarine virtually unsinkable. The submarine's acoustic signature was enormous, making stealth impossible. But Soviet naval doctrine didn't require Typhoon submarines to operate covertly. They were designed to patrol in heavily defended bastions near Soviet territory, protected by attack submarines, surface ships, and aircraft. Captain Sasoyev commanded TK-208 during her first deterrent patrol in 1981. The submarine operated in the Barents Sea, remaining within range of Soviet air cover while maintaining the ability to strike targets throughout North America. The psychological impact of the Typhoon class was enormous. American intelligence agencies had never encountered submarines of such size and capability. Each Typhoon carried more nuclear firepower than most nations' entire arsenals. 6 Typhoon submarines were completed between 1980 and 1989. Each submarine represented an investment of over $1 billion, making them among the most expensive military vehicles ever built. The end of the Cold War spelled doom for the Typhoon program. The submarines were extremely expensive to operate, requiring crews of 160 and consuming enormous amounts of fuel. Most Typhoons were decommissioned in the 1990s. Only one Typhoon remains in service today. TK-208, renamed Dmitry Donskoy, serves as a test platform for new submarine technologies. The submarine has been modified to carry the Bulava ballistic missile. The Typhoon class represented the pinnacle of Soviet submarine construction. These underwater giants demonstrated that submarines could be built to almost any size, limited only by engineering, imagination, and financial resources. But while the Soviets built the largest submarines in history, other nations were developing their own approaches to nuclear submarine warfare. Chapter 7. Modern Nuclear Submarines. In the depths of the Atlantic, USS Virginia was conducting a mission that would have been impossible just decades earlier. The year was 2022, and submarine warfare had evolved far beyond the Cold War paradigm of mutual nuclear destruction. Modern submarines were precision instruments capable of surgical strikes, intelligence gathering, and special operations support. But how had submarine technology advanced since the end of the superpower confrontation? The Virginia-class submarines represented the cutting edge of American submarine technology. These boats incorporated lessons learned from 50 years of nuclear submarine operations, while adding capabilities designed for 21st century warfare. At 377 feet long and displacing 7,800 tons submerged, they were smaller than Cold War attack submarines, but far more capable. Commander Nicole Schwegman commanded USS Delaware during her first deployment in 2021. As one of the first women to command a nuclear submarine, she represented the changing face of submarine warfare. Her crew of 134 included sailors from diverse backgrounds. The Virginia-class submarines were powered by the S-9G reactor, a revolutionary design that eliminated the need for refueling throughout the submarine's 33-year service life. This reactor used highly enriched uranium fuel that could sustain nuclear reactions for decades without replacement. Stealth remained paramount in submarine design. Virginia-class submarines incorporated advanced acoustic dampening technologies that made them virtually undetectable. Anechoic coatings absorbed sonar pulses. Machinery was mounted on vibration-isolating foundations. The propeller was designed to eliminate cavitation at all speeds. The submarine sonar systems represented a quantum leap in underwater detection capability. The large aperture bow sonar array contained thousands of individual hydrophones arranged in a spherical configuration. This system could detect submarine signatures at ranges exceeding 300 nautical miles. But modern submarines were more than just hunters. Virginia-class submarines carried 12 vertical launch system tubes capable of launching Tomahawk cruise missiles. These missiles could strike targets over 1,600 kilometers away, with precision measured in meters. The Block V Virginia submarines added the Virginia Payload Module, a section containing 4 additional VLS tubes. Each tube could carry 7 Tomahawk missiles, increasing the submarine's strike capability to 65 missiles. This firepower rivaled that of surface destroyers. Special operations support had become a crucial submarine mission. Virginia-class submarines could carry a dry deck shelter that allowed Navy SEALs to launch and recover while the submarine remained submerged. Advanced communication systems provided real-time coordination with special operations forces ashore. The human element remained crucial to submarine effectiveness. Modern submarine crews underwent years of training to master increasingly complex systems. The submarine qualification process required crew members to demonstrate detailed knowledge of nuclear propulsion, weapons systems, and emergency procedures. Lieutenant Sarah Martinez served as the weapons officer aboard USS Colorado during a classified mission in 2021. Her responsibilities included managing the submarine's torpedo and missile systems, coordinating with fire control technicians, and ensuring weapons readiness. Modern torpedoes had evolved far beyond their World War II predecessors. The Mark 48 ADCAP torpedo could travel at 60 knots and had a range of 50 kilometers. Its sophisticated guidance system could track multiple targets simultaneously and adjust its attack profile based on target characteristics. The newest American submarines incorporated artificial intelligence and machine learning technologies. Advanced computer systems could analyze sonar data, identify potential targets, and recommend tactical responses. These systems didn't replace human decision-making, but enhanced crew capabilities. International submarine development had accelerated in the 21st century. The British Astute-class submarines incorporated many American technologies while adding unique British innovations. The French Barracuda-class submarines featured pump jet propulsion and advanced sonar systems. The Russian Navy continued operating Soviet-era submarines while developing new designs. The Yesen-class submarines incorporated stealth technologies and advanced weapons systems. The Borai-class ballistic missile submarines carried Bulava missiles that maintained Russia's strategic nuclear deterrent. Submarine warfare had also expanded beyond traditional naval powers. India operated nuclear submarines leased from Russia and was developing indigenous designs. Brazil was building nuclear submarines with French assistance. Australia had announced plans to acquire nuclear submarines through the AUKUS partnership. The proliferation of nuclear submarine technology raised new strategic challenges. More nations possessed submarines capable of long-range operations and precision strikes. The underwater domain was becoming increasingly crowded and contested. Modern submarines faced new threats that didn't exist during the Cold War. Unmanned underwater vehicles could conduct surveillance and attack missions without risking human crews. Advanced sonar networks could track submarine movements across entire ocean basins. But submarines retained significant advantages. The ocean remained vast and largely opaque to most detection systems. Submarine stealth technology continued to advance faster than detection capabilities. Nuclear propulsion provided unlimited underwater endurance and global reach. The future of submarine warfare would likely emphasize unmanned systems and artificial intelligence. Autonomous underwater vehicles could conduct missions too dangerous for crewed submarines. Machine learning algorithms could process sonar data and identify targets faster than human operators. But regardless of technological advances, submarines would continue to rely on the most sophisticated weapons ever developed for underwater warfare. Chapter 8. Nuclear Submarine Armament. In the torpedo room of USS Seawolf, Torpedo Man First Class Michael Rodriguez was loading a weapon that could sink an aircraft carrier. The Mark 48 ADCAP torpedo represented the pinnacle of underwater weapon technology. At 19 feet long and weighing 3,500 pounds, it was more than just a torpedo. It was a guided missile designed specifically for underwater warfare. But how had submarine weapons evolved from simple torpedoes to sophisticated guided weapons? The evolution of submarine weapons paralleled the development of submarines themselves. Early submarines carried simple torpedoes that traveled in straight lines toward their targets. These weapons required submarines to approach within a few thousand yards, exposing them to counterattack. Modern submarine weapons could engage targets at ranges exceeding 50 kilometers. The Mark 48 torpedo was the primary weapon of American nuclear submarines. This wire-guided torpedo could travel at 60 knots and had a range of 50 kilometers. Its sophisticated guidance system used active and passive sonar to track targets, adjusting its course based on target movements. The torpedo's warhead contained 650 pounds of PBXN-103, explosive, enough to break the back of any surface ship or submarine. The warhead was designed to explode beneath the target's keel, creating a gas bubble that would lift the ship out of the water before allowing it to crash back down. But torpedoes were only one component of modern submarine armament. The Tomahawk cruise missile had transformed submarines from purely naval weapons into strategic strike platforms. These missiles could attack targets over 1,600 kilometers inland, with precision measured in meters. Commander James Peterson commanded USS Florida during Operation Iraqi Freedom in 2003. His submarine launched the first Tomahawk missiles of the conflict, striking targets in Baghdad from a position in the Red Sea. The missiles flew over 1,000 kilometers to their targets. The Tomahawk missile was 21 feet long and weighed 3,000 pounds. Its turbofan engine could propel the missile at 850 kilometers per hour for over 4 hours. The missile's guidance system used GPS navigation and terrain-following radar to reach targets with unprecedented accuracy. Submarine-launched ballistic missiles represented the ultimate expression of underwater firepower. The Trident II D5 missile, carried by Ohio-class submarines, could deliver multiple nuclear warheads to targets over 11,000 kilometers away. Each missile was 44 feet long and weighed 130,000 pounds. The Trident missile's 3-stage solid rocket motor could accelerate its payload to speeds exceeding 24,000 kilometers per hour. The missile carried up to 14 nuclear warheads, each capable of destroying a city. Advanced guidance systems ensured accuracy within 90 meters at maximum range. Captain Michael J. Bailey commanded USS Tennessee during a Trident missile test launch in 2020. The submarine fired the missile from a depth of 150 feet while traveling at speed. The missile broke the surface and ignited its rocket motor, accelerating toward a target over 7,000 kilometers away. The missile launch process was a carefully choreographed sequence requiring precise coordination between multiple crew members. The submarine had to maintain exact depth and heading while the missile was ejected from its launch tube. Gas generators created pressure to push the missile to the surface before its rocket motor ignited. Soviet and Russian submarines carried equally impressive weapons. The R-39 ballistic missile, carried by Typhoon-class submarines, was the largest submarine-launched missile ever deployed. At 16 meters long and weighing 84 tons, could deliver 10 nuclear warheads over a range of 8,300 kilometers. The Shkval supercavitating torpedo was perhaps the most revolutionary Soviet submarine weapon. This torpedo created a bubble of gas around itself, allowing it to travel at over 200 knots underwater. No Western submarine could evade a Shkval torpedo once it was launched. Modern Russian submarines carry the Status 6 torpedo, officially designated Poseidon. This nuclear-powered torpedo has a range of 10,000 kilometers and carries a 100 megaton nuclear warhead. The weapon is designed to create radioactive tsunamis that could devastate coastal cities. Chinese submarines have developed their own advanced weapons. The YJ-18 anti-ship missile can be launched from submarine torpedo tubes and has a range of over 500 kilometers. The missile uses a rocket booster to reach high altitude before diving toward its target at supersonic speed. Submarine mine warfare represented another dimension of underwater armament. Modern submarines could lay sophisticated mines that could distinguish between different types of vessels. The Mark 60 Captor mine contained a Mark 46 torpedo that would launch when enemy submarines were detected. The human element remained crucial in submarine weapons employment. Fire control technicians underwent years of training to master the complex systems required to launch and guide submarine weapons. The process of engaging targets required coordination between sonar operators, fire control technicians, and the submarine's commanding officer. Sonar technician second class Jennifer Kim served aboard USS Hartford during a training exercise in 2021. Her responsibilities included operating the submarine's sonar systems, tracking potential targets, and providing targeting data to the fire control team. Modern submarine weapons incorporated artificial intelligence and machine learning technologies. Advanced computer systems could analyze target characteristics and recommend optimal attack profiles. These systems didn't replace human decision-making, but enhanced crew capabilities by processing vast amounts of information quickly. The future of submarine weapons would likely emphasize longer range and greater precision. Hypersonic missiles could strike targets anywhere in the world within minutes of launch. Autonomous weapons could select and engage targets without human intervention. But regardless of technological advances, submarine weapons would continue to rely on the stealth and surprise that made submarines effective. The ability to approach targets undetected and launch weapons without warning remained the submarine's greatest advantage. The effectiveness of these weapons depended on the engineering marvels that powered and controlled them. Chapter 9. Engineering Marvels. Deep in the reactor compartment of USS Virginia, nuclear machinist mate First Class David Chen was monitoring systems that generated more power than a small city. The S9G reactor core contained uranium fuel enriched to over 90% U-235. Nuclear fission released enormous energy as uranium atoms split, heating water to over 500 degrees Fahrenheit. This superheated water transferred its energy to a secondary steam loop that drove turbines connected to the submarine's propeller shaft. The pressurized water reactor was the heart of every American nuclear submarine. This design used ordinary water as both coolant and neutron moderator, simplifying the reactor's construction and operation. The reactor core contained fuel assemblies arranged in a precise geometric pattern to maintain controlled nuclear fission. The reactor's primary cooling loop operated at pressures exceeding 2,000 pounds per square inch. This extreme pressure prevented the water from boiling despite temperatures that would instantly vaporize water at atmospheric pressure. Massive pumps circulated the radioactive coolant through the reactor core and steam generators. Steam generators were the interface between the radioactive primary loop and the clean secondary loop. These heat exchangers contained thousands of tubes through which primary coolant flowed. Secondary water surrounded these tubes, absorbing heat and converting to steam. The propulsion turbines converted steam energy into mechanical rotation. High-pressure steam struck precisely angled turbine blades, causing the turbine shaft to rotate at over 3,000 revolutions per minute. Reduction gears decreased this speed to the optimal propeller rotation rate while increasing torque. Nuclear submarine hulls were marvels of metallurgical engineering. HY-80 steel provided the strength needed to withstand crushing deep ocean pressures while containing the enormous forces generated by nuclear propulsion. The hull was constructed from curved steel plates welded together with tolerances measured in fractions of inches. The submarine's ballast tanks allowed controlled diving and surfacing. These tanks could be flooded with seawater to increase the submarine's weight, causing it to submerge. High-pressure air could blow the water out of the tanks, reducing weight and causing the submarine to surface. Submarine life support systems created a habitable environment in the most hostile conditions on Earth. Atmospheric control systems removed carbon dioxide and other contaminants while adding oxygen generated by electrolysis of seawater. Air purification systems eliminated odors and toxic gases. The submarine's electrical systems generated and distributed power throughout the boat. Steam-driven generators produced alternating current that was converted to direct current for most submarine systems. Battery banks provided emergency power and allowed silent running when the reactor was shut down. Navigation systems allowed submarines to determine their position with extraordinary accuracy. Inertial navigation systems used gyroscopes and accelerometers to track the submarine's movement from a known starting point. These systems could determine position within a few meters after weeks of submerged operations. Sonar systems were the submarine's primary sensors for underwater operations. Passive sonar arrays listened for sounds generated by other vessels, marine life, and geological activity. Active sonar transmitted sound pulses and analyzed the echoes to determine range and bearing to targets. Communication systems allowed submarines to maintain contact with naval headquarters while remaining submerged. Very low-frequency radio waves could penetrate seawater to depths of several hundred feet. Satellite communication systems provided high-speed data links when submarines surfaced. The submarine's computer systems integrated all these technologies into a cohesive whole. Advanced processors controlled reactor operations, navigation, sonar, and weapons systems. Fiber optic networks transmitted data throughout the submarine at the speed of light. Maintenance of these complex systems required extraordinary skill and dedication. Nuclear-trained personnel underwent years of education and training to qualify for submarine duty. Reactor operators learned to monitor and control nuclear reactions with precision measured in fractions of percent. The submarine's crew lived and worked in an environment that demanded perfection. A single mistake in reactor operations could cause a nuclear accident. Navigation errors could result in collision with underwater obstacles. Weapons malfunctions could endanger the submarine and its crew. Quality control in submarine construction exceeded that of any other military system. Every component was tested beyond its design limits. Manufacturing tolerances were measured in thousandths of inches. Materials were subjected to extensive testing to ensure they could withstand the stresses of submarine operations. The cost of this engineering excellence was enormous. Modern nuclear submarines cost over $3 billion each, making them among the most expensive military systems ever built. The complexity of submarine systems required specialized manufacturing facilities and highly trained personnel, but the investment was justified by the submarine's capabilities. Nuclear submarines could operate anywhere in the world's oceans for months without support. They could strike targets thousands of kilometers away with precision weapons. Most importantly, they provided a strategic deterrent that helped maintain peace. The men and women who operated these technological marvels faced challenges that tested the limits of human endurance. Chapter 10. The Human Element. 300 feet beneath the Pacific Ocean, Petty Officer Sarah Williams was beginning her 4th month underwater. The submarine USS Michigan had been submerged since leaving port, and the crew was feeling the psychological strain of isolation from the outside world. No sunlight, no fresh air, no contact with family except for brief radio messages. But how do human beings adapt to life in a steel tube surrounded by crushing water pressure? Submarine duty attracted a unique type of person. The volunteer-only service required individuals who could function effectively in confined spaces while maintaining absolute attention to detail. Psychological screening eliminated candidates who showed signs of claustrophobia, depression, or inability to work in teams. The submarine qualification process, known as earning dolphins, was one of the most demanding in any military service. Crew members had to demonstrate detailed knowledge of every system aboard the submarine. They learned to operate nuclear reactors, fire control systems, life support equipment, and emergency procedures. Submarine crews were organized into departments that reflected the boat's complex systems. The engineering department operated the nuclear reactor and propulsion systems. The navigation department handled sonar, navigation, and communication systems. The weapons department maintained torpedoes, missiles, and fire control systems. The submarine's commanding officer bore ultimate responsibility for the boat and its crew. Captain Lisa Franchetti commanded USS New Mexico during a deployment to the Western Pacific in 2019. Her responsibilities included tactical decisions, crew welfare, and ensuring the submarine's mission success. Living conditions aboard submarines were challenging by any standard. Crew members shared sleeping quarters called racks that were barely larger than coffins. Personal space was limited to a small locker for clothing and personal items. Privacy was virtually non-existent. The submarine's atmosphere was carefully controlled but never felt natural. Air recycling systems removed carbon dioxide and added oxygen, but the air always carried the smell of machinery, cooking, and human habitation. Many crew members experienced psychological effects from prolonged isolation from natural environments. Food service aboard submarines was surprisingly good, considering the constraints of underwater operations. Submarine cooks prepared meals for over 100 crew members, using ingredients that had to last for months. Fresh food was consumed early in deployments, followed by frozen and canned provisions. Sleep schedules aboard submarines followed an 18-hour cycle rather than the normal 24-hour day. Crew members worked 6 hours, had 6 hours off duty, and slept 6 hours. This schedule allowed maximum utilization of sleeping quarters while ensuring adequate rest. Medical care aboard submarines was provided by independent duty corpsmen who received extensive training in emergency medicine. These medics could perform surgery, treat injuries, and handle medical emergencies without physician supervision. The submarine's medical facilities included an operating table, X-ray equipment, and a comprehensive pharmacy. Communication with family was limited and carefully controlled. Crew members could send and receive brief messages through the submarine's communication systems. Personal phone calls were impossible during submerged operations. This isolation from family was one of the most difficult aspects of submarine duty. Emergency procedures were practiced constantly to ensure crew readiness. Fire drills, flooding exercises, and reactor casualties were simulated regularly. Every crew member had to demonstrate the ability to respond to emergencies regardless of their primary duties. The psychological effects of submarine duty were well documented. Crew members experienced stress from confinement, isolation, and the constant awareness of danger. Some developed claustrophobia or depression during long deployments. Submarine crews received psychological support and counseling. Women began serving aboard submarines in 2010, ending decades of male-only submarine crews. The integration required modifications to living quarters and procedures, but women proved equally capable of submarine duty. Female officers and enlisted personnel served in all submarine departments. Submarine families faced unique challenges. Spouses and children had to cope with extended separations and limited communication. The secretive nature of submarine operations meant that families often didn't know where their loved ones were or when they would return. The submarine community was small and close-knit. Crew members developed bonds that lasted throughout their careers. The shared experience of submarine duty created a unique culture based on mutual dependence and trust. Submarine veterans often remained friends for life. Submarine duty was voluntary, and crew members could request transfer to surface ships at any time. However, most submariners chose to remain in the submarine service throughout their careers. The challenging nature of submarine duty attracted individuals who thrived on complexity and responsibility. The human element remained the most critical component of submarine operations. Advanced technology and sophisticated weapons were useless without skilled crews to operate them. The men and women who served aboard nuclear submarines represented the elite of naval personnel. Their skills were constantly tested in a deadly game of underwater hide-and-seek. Chapter 11. Stealth and Detection. In the control room of USS Seawolf, sonar technician First Class Maria Rodriguez was tracking a contact that shouldn't exist. The sonar signature was faint, barely distinguishable from background ocean noise, but Rodriguez's trained ear detected the subtle acoustic anomaly that indicated a submarine trying to remain hidden. The contact was over 50 nautical miles away, moving slowly and quietly through the depths. The physics of underwater detection were fundamentally different from surface or air operations. Light penetrated only a few hundred feet into seawater, making visual detection impossible at operational depths. Radar waves were absorbed by water within a few meters. Only sound waves could travel long distances underwater. Sound traveled through seawater at approximately 1,500 meters per second, much faster than through air. But the ocean was not a uniform medium. Temperature, salinity, and pressure variations created layers that could bend, reflect, or absorb sound waves. Passive sonar systems listened for sounds generated by other vessels. Every submarine produced acoustic signatures from its reactor cooling pumps, propeller, and auxiliary machinery. These sounds could be detected at ranges exceeding 100 nautical miles by sensitive hydrophone arrays. The AN/BQQ-10 sonar system, installed in modern American submarines, was the most sophisticated underwater detection system ever built. The spherical sonar array in the bow contained over 4,000 individual hydrophones arranged in a precise geometric pattern. Towed array sonars extended detection ranges even further. These systems deployed hydrophone arrays behind the submarine on cables up to 3,000 feet long. The arrays were positioned away from the submarine's own noise, allowing detection of extremely quiet targets. Active sonar transmitted sound pulses and analyzed the echoes to determine range and bearing to targets. This technique provided precise target information, but revealed the transmitting submarine's position to anyone listening. Active sonar was rarely used during wartime operations. Submarine stealth technology focused on reducing acoustic signatures to the lowest possible levels. Every component was designed to minimize noise generation. Reactor cooling pumps used magnetic bearings that eliminated mechanical contact and vibration. Machinery was mounted on vibration-isolating foundations. The submarine's propeller was perhaps the most critical component for acoustic stealth. Conventional propellers created cavitation, the formation and collapse of vapor bubbles that generated distinctive noise signatures. Advanced propeller designs eliminated cavitation through precise blade shaping and rotation speeds. Anechoic coatings covered the submarine's hull to absorb sonar pulses from enemy detection systems. These coatings contained thousands of tiny air bubbles that absorbed sound energy rather than reflecting it back to the transmitting sonar. Hull shaping also contributed to stealth. Modern submarines use teardrop hulls that minimize turbulence and noise generation. The sail was carefully shaped to reduce flow noise. Every external fitting was designed to minimize acoustic signature. But stealth was a constant battle against detection technology. Enemy sonar systems became more sensitive with each generation. Computer processing allowed extraction of submarine signatures from increasingly complex background noise. Satellite technology might eventually detect submarines operating near the surface. The underwater environment itself affected detection capabilities. Ocean temperature layers could create acoustic shadows that hid submarines from sonar. Underwater mountains and valleys could mask submarine movements. Marine life generated noise that could confuse sonar operators. Submarine commanders used these environmental factors to their advantage. They operated in areas where acoustic conditions favored their submarines. They used underwater terrain to mask their movements. They timed operations to coincide with environmental conditions that degraded enemy detection capabilities. The cat-and-mouse game between submarines required extraordinary skill from both hunters and hunted. Submarine commanders had to balance the need for stealth with mission requirements. Moving too slowly might allow enemy submarines to close to attack range. Moving too quickly might generate noise that revealed their position. Sonar operators were the eyes and ears of submarine operations. They underwent years of training to recognize the subtle acoustic signatures that indicated enemy submarines. They learned to distinguish between marine life, geological activity, and man-made sounds. Computer technology revolutionized sonar operations. Advanced processors could analyze thousands of acoustic contacts simultaneously. Pattern recognition software could identify submarine signatures automatically. Machine learning algorithms improved detection capabilities by learning from operational experience. But human judgment remained crucial. Computers could process vast amounts of data, but experienced sonar operators could recognize subtle patterns that escaped automated systems. The combination of human expertise and computer processing created detection capabilities that exceeded either alone. Electronic warfare added another dimension to submarine stealth. Submarines could deploy decoys that mimicked their acoustic signatures, while the real submarine escaped. Electronic jammers could interfere with enemy sonar systems. Advanced communication systems allowed submarines to coordinate operations while maintaining stealth. The future of submarine stealth would likely emphasize new technologies and tactics. Metamaterials might create acoustic cloaking that rendered submarines completely invisible to sonar. Artificial intelligence could optimize submarine operations for maximum stealth. Quantum sensors might detect submarines through previously unknown physical phenomena. But regardless of technological advances, the fundamental challenge remained unchanged. Submarines had to remain hidden while accomplishing their missions. The ocean was vast, but detection technology continued to improve. The balance between stealth and detection would continue to drive submarine development. As submarine technology advanced, so did the vision of what these underwater weapons might become. Chapter 12: Future of Nuclear Submarines. In the design studios of Electric Boat, engineers were creating submarines that would patrol the oceans for the next 50 years. The Columbia-class ballistic missile submarines represented the future of underwater nuclear deterrence. These boats would replace the aging Ohio-class submarines with capabilities that seemed like science fiction just decades earlier. But what technologies would define the next generation of nuclear submarines? The Columbia-class submarines were the most expensive military program in American history. At $15 billion per submarine, they cost more than aircraft carriers. But these boats would carry the nation's nuclear deterrent for the next half-century, making their capabilities crucial for national security. The submarines were designed around the Trident II D5 missile, but with significant improvements over previous designs. At 560 feet long and displacing 20,800 tons submerged, they were larger than any previous American submarine. The submarine's reactor represented a revolutionary advance in nuclear propulsion. The PWR-3 reactor used highly enriched uranium fuel that would last for the submarine's entire 42-year service life. This eliminated the need for refueling, reducing life cycle costs and improving availability. Electric drive propulsion replaced the traditional steam turbine and reduction gear system. The reactor generated electricity that powered electric motors connected directly to the propeller shaft. This system eliminated the noise and vibration associated with mechanical drivetrains while providing precise speed control. Advanced materials would define future submarine construction. Carbon fiber composites could provide strength equal to steel at a fraction of the weight. Metamaterials could create acoustic cloaking that rendered submarines invisible to sonar. Smart materials could change their properties in response to environmental conditions. Artificial intelligence would revolutionize submarine operations. Machine learning algorithms could analyze sonar data and identify targets faster than human operators. Autonomous systems could optimize submarine routing for maximum stealth and efficiency. Predictive maintenance could identify equipment failures before they occurred. The submarine's crew would be smaller than previous designs, despite increased capabilities. Advanced automation would eliminate many routine tasks currently performed by human crew members. Artificial intelligence would assist with navigation, sonar operations, and weapons employment. Unmanned underwater vehicles would extend submarine capabilities beyond the boat itself. These autonomous systems could conduct reconnaissance, lay mines, or attack targets while the mother submarine remains safely hidden. Swarms of small UUVs could overwhelm enemy defenses or create diversions. Quantum technologies might provide unprecedented capabilities. Quantum sensors could detect submarines through gravitational anomalies or magnetic field disturbances. Quantum communication could provide unhackable communication links between submarines and naval headquarters. Quantum computing could break enemy encryption while protecting friendly communications. Directed energy weapons might eventually replace explosive warheads for some missions. Laser weapons could disable enemy sensors or communication systems without causing permanent damage. Microwave weapons could disrupt enemy electronics while leaving personnel unharmed. The submarine's hull might incorporate active camouflage systems that changed color and texture to match the surrounding environment. Adaptive materials could alter the submarine's acoustic signature to mimic marine life or geological features. The result would be submarines that were virtually undetectable by any known sensor system. Modular construction would allow submarines to be reconfigured for different missions. Weapon modules could be swapped to provide different capabilities. Sensor packages could be upgraded without major shipyard work. The result would be submarines that could adapt to changing mission requirements throughout their service lives. International submarine development was accelerating rapidly. China was building nuclear submarines at an unprecedented pace, with new designs that incorporated advanced technologies. Russia was developing submarines with capabilities that challenged American technological superiority. The proliferation of submarine technology raised new strategic challenges. More nations would possess submarines capable of global operations and precision strikes. The underwater domain would become increasingly crowded and contested. Traditional naval powers could no longer assume submarine superiority. Environmental considerations would influence future submarine design. Climate change was altering ocean conditions and opening new operational areas. Melting Arctic ice was creating new submarine patrol areas and strategic challenges. Environmental regulations might limit submarine operations in sensitive marine ecosystems. The cost of advanced submarine technology was becoming prohibitive for all but the wealthiest nations. Future submarine programs might require international cooperation to share development costs. Standardized designs might reduce costs while maintaining technological advantages. Cyber warfare would become an increasingly important aspect of submarine operations. Submarines would need to defend against cyber attacks while conducting their own electronic warfare operations. Artificial intelligence systems would need protection against adversarial machine learning attacks. The human element would remain crucial despite increasing automation. Submarine crews would need to understand and operate increasingly complex systems. Training programs would need to evolve to prepare crews for autonomous systems and artificial intelligence. Space-based systems would provide new capabilities for submarine operations. Satellite communication would allow real-time coordination with global forces. Space-based sensors might detect submarines through previously unknown signatures. Submarine-launched missiles might target satellites to deny enemy space-based capabilities. The future of nuclear submarines would be shaped by the intersection of multiple technologies. Artificial intelligence, quantum computing, advanced materials, and autonomous systems would combine to create capabilities that exceeded the sum of their parts. But regardless of technological advances, submarines would continue to provide unique capabilities that no other platform could match. The ability to operate undetected in the world's oceans would remain strategically valuable. Nuclear propulsion would continue to provide unlimited underwater endurance and global reach. The nuclear submarine had evolved from Rickover's experimental Nautilus to the ultimate expression of naval technology. These underwater leviathans carried enough firepower to destroy civilization while remaining hidden in the ocean's depths. They represented both humanity's greatest technological achievement and its most sobering reminder of the destructive power of modern warfare. From Cornelis van Drebbel's leather-covered rowboat to the Typhoon giants, the submarine had transformed naval warfare and global strategy. The nuclear submarine would continue to patrol the world's oceans, a silent guardian of peace through the threat of overwhelming retaliation. The age of the nuclear submarine was far from over. As long as nations competed for strategic advantage and the oceans remained vast and largely opaque, submarines would continue to evolve and adapt. The next chapter in submarine warfare was being written in design studios and shipyards around the world. The nuclear submarine had changed everything: how wars were fought, how nations negotiated, how peace was maintained. These underwater fortresses would continue to shape global politics and military strategy for generations to come. In the silent depths of the world's oceans, the nuclear submarine would remain humanity's most powerful and most hidden weapon. Extended analysis. Global nuclear submarine programs. The Nuclear Submarine Club was exclusive, but membership was expanding. By 2023, only 6 nations operated nuclear-powered submarines: the United States, Russia, Britain, France, China, and India. But this exclusive club was about to grow as more nations recognized the strategic advantages of nuclear submarine technology. The American nuclear submarine program remained the world's largest and most advanced. The U.S. Navy operated 68 nuclear submarines, including 14 Ohio-class ballistic missile submarines, 3 Seawolf-class attack submarines, and 51 Virginia-class attack submarines. This fleet represented over 60% of the world's nuclear submarine capability. American submarine construction was centered at 2 shipyards: Electric Boat in Groton, Connecticut, and Newport News Shipbuilding in Virginia. These facilities employed over 30,000 workers and represented the pinnacle of submarine construction technology. The industrial base required to build nuclear submarines was enormous and took decades to develop. The Russian nuclear submarine fleet was the second largest in the world, with approximately 40 boats in service. The fleet included 11 ballistic missile submarines, 28 attack submarines, and 1 special mission submarine. Russian submarines were built at shipyards in Severodvinsk and Komsomolsk-on-Amur. Russian submarine technology had evolved significantly since the Cold War. The Yasen-class attack submarines incorporated stealth technologies that approached American standards. The Borai-class ballistic missile submarines carried Bulava missiles that maintained Russia's strategic nuclear deterrent. The British Royal Navy operated 4 Vanguard-class ballistic missile submarines and 7 Astute-class attack submarines. British submarines were built at BAE Systems shipyard in Barrow-in-Furness, which had been constructing submarines for over a century. The Astute-class submarines incorporated many American technologies through the special relationship between the two nations. The submarines used American sonar systems and weapons while maintaining British design characteristics. The partnership allowed Britain to maintain an independent nuclear submarine capability. France operated 4 Triomphant-class ballistic missile submarines and 6 Rubis-class attack submarines. French submarines were built at Naval Group's facility in Cherbourg, which had developed unique French technologies including pump jet propulsion and advanced sonar systems. The French nuclear submarine program emphasized independence from American technology. French submarines used indigenous reactors, sonar systems, and weapons. This independence allowed France to export submarine technology to other nations without American approval. China's nuclear submarine program was expanding rapidly. The People's Liberation Army, Navy, operated 6 ballistic missile submarines and 12 attack submarines. Chinese submarines were built at shipyards in Huludao and Wuhan, using increasingly sophisticated technology. Chinese submarine development had accelerated dramatically in the 21st century. The Type 094 ballistic missile submarines carried JL-2 missiles that could strike targets throughout the Pacific. The Type 093 attack submarines incorporated stealth technologies and advanced weapons systems. India operated 1 ballistic missile submarine and 2 attack submarines leased from Russia. The indigenous Arihant-class ballistic missile submarine program represented India's entry into the Nuclear Submarine Club. Indian submarines were built at the Shipbuilding Center in Visakhapatnam. The Indian nuclear submarine program faced significant technical challenges. Indigenous reactor development required assistance from Russia and other nations. Submarine construction required advanced materials and manufacturing techniques that India was still developing. Brazil was developing nuclear submarines with French assistance through the PROSUB program. The program included technology transfer for nuclear propulsion and submarine construction. Brazilian submarines would be built at the Itaguaí Naval Complex near Rio de Janeiro. Australia had announced plans to acquire nuclear submarines through the AUKUS partnership with the United States and Britain. The program would provide Australia with nuclear submarine technology while strengthening alliance relationships in the Pacific region. The proliferation of nuclear submarine technology raised concerns about nuclear proliferation and regional stability. Nuclear submarines required highly enriched uranium fuel that could potentially be diverted to weapons programs. International oversight was essential to prevent proliferation. The Nuclear Suppliers Group controlled exports of nuclear submarine technology to prevent proliferation. The International Atomic Energy Agency monitored nuclear submarine programs to ensure compliance with non-proliferation agreements. These safeguards were essential for maintaining international security. The cost of nuclear submarine programs was enormous and increasing. Modern nuclear submarines cost over $3 billion each, making them affordable only for the wealthiest nations. Development costs for new submarine programs could exceed $50 billion. International cooperation was becoming essential for submarine development. The cost and complexity of modern submarines exceeded the capabilities of most individual nations. Partnerships allowed sharing of development costs while maintaining technological advantages. The submarine industrial base was highly specialized and difficult to develop. Nuclear submarine construction required unique facilities, materials, and expertise that took decades to establish. Only a few nations possessed the industrial capability to build nuclear submarines independently. Submarine crew training was equally challenging. Nuclear submarine operations required highly skilled personnel who underwent years of education and training. The small pool of qualified submarine personnel limited the expansion of nuclear submarine programs. Environmental concerns were influencing submarine development and operations. Nuclear accidents could cause long-term environmental damage. Submarine operations in sensitive marine ecosystems required careful environmental management. The disposal of nuclear submarines at the end of their service lives created significant challenges. radioactive components required specialized handling and storage. The cost of submarine disposal could exceed the original construction cost. International law governing submarine operations was complex and evolving. Submarines operated in international waters where multiple legal frameworks applied. Disputes over submarine operations could escalate into international incidents. The future of nuclear submarine proliferation would likely be shaped by technological, economic, and political factors. Nations seeking nuclear submarines would need to balance the strategic advantages against enormous costs and technical challenges. Regional security considerations would influence submarine proliferation. Nations facing submarine threats from neighbors might seek their own nuclear submarine capabilities. This dynamic could lead to regional submarine arms races. The nuclear submarine represented the ultimate expression of naval technology and strategic power. These underwater leviathans would continue to shape international relations and military strategy for generations to come. The exclusive nuclear submarine club would likely expand, but membership would remain limited to nations with the resources and determination to master this ultimate naval weapon. Technological deep dive. Nuclear propulsion systems. Inside the reactor compartment of USS Connecticut, the controlled splitting of atoms was generating enough energy to power a small city. Nuclear propulsion was the technology that transformed submarines from surface vessels that could submerge into true underwater craft. But how did engineers harness the enormous energy of nuclear fission and contain it within the confines of a submarine hull? The pressurized water reactor was the heart of every American nuclear submarine. This design used ordinary water as both coolant and neutron moderator, creating a self-regulating system that was inherently safe. The reactor core contained fuel assemblies made of enriched uranium dioxide pellets enclosed in zirconium alloy tubes. Nuclear fission occurred when neutrons struck uranium-235 nuclei, causing them to split into smaller atoms and release enormous energy. Each fission event released approximately 200 million electron volts of energy, millions of times more than chemical reactions. The reactor core was designed to maintain a controlled chain reaction. Control rods made of neutron-absorbing materials could be inserted into the core to slow or stop the nuclear reaction. The reactor's geometry and fuel arrangement ensured that the chain reaction would stop if the reactor was damaged or flooded. Primary cooling water circulated through the reactor core at pressures exceeding 2,000 pounds per square inch. This extreme pressure prevented the water from boiling despite temperatures exceeding 500 degrees Fahrenheit. The superheated water transferred its energy to steam generators. Steam generators were massive heat exchangers that transferred energy from the radioactive primary loop to the clean secondary loop. These devices contained thousands of tubes through which primary coolant flowed. Secondary water surrounded these tubes, absorbing heat and converting to steam. The steam drove turbines that were connected to the submarine's propeller shaft through reduction gears. High-pressure steam struck precisely angled turbine blades, causing the turbine to rotate at over 3,000 revolutions per minute. Reduction gears decreased this speed while increasing torque. The entire nuclear propulsion system was contained within heavily shielded compartments that protected the crew from radiation. Lead and steel shielding absorbed gamma rays and neutrons. The reactor compartment was sealed from the rest of the submarine during normal operations. Nuclear fuel for submarines was enriched to over 90% uranium-235, much higher than civilian power plants. This high enrichment allowed the reactor to operate for decades without refueling. The fuel was manufactured at specialized facilities under strict security controls. Reactor safety systems were designed to prevent accidents and contain radioactive materials. Multiple independent systems could shut down the reactor in emergency situations. Backup cooling systems could remove decay heat even if the primary cooling system failed. The nuclear Navy's safety record was exceptional. American nuclear submarines had operated for over 6,000 reactor years without a single reactor accident causing radiation exposure to the public. This safety record was achieved through rigorous training, strict procedures, and conservative design practices. Nuclear waste from submarine reactors was minimal compared to civilian power plants. The highly enriched fuel burned more completely, leaving less radioactive waste. Spent fuel was stored in secure facilities until it could be reprocessed or disposed of permanently. The submarine's electrical systems were powered by steam-driven generators that produced alternating current. This electricity was converted to direct current for most submarine systems. Battery banks provided emergency power and allowed silent running when the reactor was shut down. Reactor control systems used analog and digital computers to monitor and control nuclear reactions. These systems could automatically adjust control rod positions to maintain desired power levels. Safety systems could shut down the reactor faster than human operators could respond. The submarine's propulsion control systems allowed precise speed control from the control room. Throttle controls adjusted steam flow to the turbines. A head and a stern throttles allowed forward and reverse propulsion. Emergency systems could stop the submarine quickly in dangerous situations. Nuclear propulsion provided submarines with capabilities that were impossible with conventional power. Unlimited underwater endurance allowed submarines to remain submerged for months. High submerged speed allowed submarines to outrun most surface ships. Global range allowed submarines to operate anywhere in the world's oceans. The development of nuclear propulsion required advances in multiple technologies. Metallurgy advances created materials that could withstand radiation and high temperatures. Manufacturing techniques achieved the precision required for nuclear components. Quality control systems ensured absolute reliability. Nuclear submarine reactors were designed for specific operational requirements. Ballistic missile submarines required reactors that could operate quietly for extended periods. Attack submarines needed reactors that could provide high power for pursuit operations. Different reactor designs optimized performance for different missions. The future of nuclear propulsion would likely emphasize improved efficiency and reduced maintenance. Advanced fuel designs could extend reactor life even further. Improved materials could reduce the size and weight of reactor components. Artificial intelligence could optimize reactor operations for maximum efficiency. But the fundamental principles of nuclear propulsion would remain unchanged. The enormous energy density of nuclear fuel would continue to provide submarines with capabilities that no other power source could match. Nuclear propulsion would remain the key technology that made submarines the ultimate naval weapon. Submarine warfare tactics and strategy. In the vast expanse of the Pacific Ocean, USS Hawaii was playing a deadly game of three-dimensional chess. Submarine warfare required tactics and strategies that were fundamentally different from surface naval combat. The ocean's three-dimensional nature, the physics of underwater detection, and the stealth capabilities of submarines created a unique form of warfare that demanded specialized skills and knowledge. The basic principle of submarine warfare was to remain undetected while gathering intelligence or attacking enemy forces. Submarines used stealth as their primary defense, avoiding detection rather than fighting their way through enemy forces. This approach required careful planning and precise execution. Submarine commanders had to understand the ocean environment and how it affected their operations. Water temperature, salinity, and depth created acoustic layers that could hide submarines from sonar detection. Underwater terrain provided concealment and tactical advantages. Ocean currents affected submarine movement and fuel consumption. The submarine's sonar systems were both its primary sensor and its greatest vulnerability. Passive sonar allowed submarines to detect enemy forces without revealing their own position. But active sonar, while providing precise target information, announced the submarine's presence to anyone listening. Submarine tactics emphasized patience and careful positioning. Commanders would spend hours or days maneuvering into optimal attack positions. The goal was to achieve a firing solution that maximized the probability of success while minimizing the risk of counterattack. The attack phase required split-second timing and precise coordination. Torpedo launches had to account for target movement, water conditions, and the time required for weapons to reach their targets. Multiple weapons might be fired to ensure target destruction and overcome defensive measures. Evasion tactics were equally important. After attacking, submarines had to escape before enemy forces could locate and counterattack. This required high-speed maneuvering, use of acoustic countermeasures, and exploitation of environmental conditions that degraded enemy detection capabilities. Ballistic missile submarines used different tactics focused on remaining undetected during extended patrols. These submarines operated in patrol areas where they could launch missiles at predetermined targets. The key was to remain hidden while maintaining the ability to receive launch orders. Attack submarines conducted multiple types of missions that required different tactical approaches. Anti-submarine warfare missions required tracking enemy submarines without being detected. Intelligence-gathering missions required approaching enemy forces closely enough to collect useful information. Land attack missions using cruise missiles required submarines to approach enemy coastlines while avoiding detection by coastal defense systems. Special operations support required precise navigation and timing to insert and extract Special Forces personnel. Submarine warfare was inherently psychological. The knowledge that enemy submarines might be present affected the behavior of surface forces. Merchant ships altered their routes to avoid submarine patrol areas. Naval forces devoted significant resources to anti-submarine warfare. The strategic impact of submarines extended far beyond their actual combat effectiveness. The threat of submarine attack forced enemies to divert resources to defensive measures. Convoy escorts, anti-submarine aircraft, and sonar networks all represented resources that could not be used for offensive operations. Nuclear submarines revolutionized submarine warfare by eliminating the limitations of conventional propulsion. Nuclear submarines could maintain high speeds for extended periods, allowing them to pursue fast targets or escape from dangerous situations. Unlimited underwater endurance allowed extended operations in remote areas. Modern submarine warfare incorporated advanced technologies that enhanced traditional tactics. Satellite communication allowed real-time coordination with other forces. Advanced sonar systems provided unprecedented detection capabilities. Precision weapons allowed attacks from greater ranges with higher accuracy. Electronic warfare became an increasingly important aspect of submarine operations. Submarines could intercept enemy communications and gather intelligence about enemy capabilities and intentions. Electronic countermeasures could degrade enemy detection systems and protect friendly forces. Submarine commanders had to balance multiple competing requirements. Mission success required aggressive tactics and close approaches to enemy forces. Crew safety demanded conservative tactics and careful risk management. Political considerations might limit the use of certain weapons or tactics. The training of submarine crews was crucial for tactical success. Crew members had to master complex systems while maintaining the ability to respond quickly to changing tactical situations. Realistic training exercises prepared crews for the stress and confusion of actual combat. Submarine warfare doctrine evolved continuously as new technologies and threats emerged. The lessons learned from each operation were incorporated into training programs and tactical manuals. International exercises allowed submarine forces to practice against different opponents and learn new techniques. The future of submarine warfare would likely emphasize autonomous systems and artificial intelligence. Unmanned underwater vehicles could conduct reconnaissance and attack missions while keeping crewed submarines safely hidden. Machine learning algorithms could analyze vast amounts of sensor data and identify optimal tactical solutions. But the fundamental principles of submarine warfare would remain unchanged. Stealth, patience, and precise execution would continue to be the keys to submarine success. The three-dimensional nature of underwater combat would continue to challenge submarine commanders and crews. Submarine warfare represented the ultimate test of naval skill and technology. The unforgiving ocean environment, the physics of underwater detection, and the lethality of modern weapons created a form of combat that demanded perfection from both equipment and personnel. The nuclear submarine had transformed naval warfare by providing platforms that could operate anywhere in the world's oceans with unprecedented stealth and firepower. These underwater predators would continue to patrol the depths, ready to strike without warning in defense of their nation's interests. Conclusion: the silent guardians. In the depths of the world's oceans, nuclear submarines continue their eternal vigil. From Cornelis van Drebbel's leather-covered rowboat to the massive Typhoon giants, the submarine has evolved into humanity's most sophisticated weapon of war. The nuclear submarine represents the pinnacle of this evolution, a platform that combines stealth, endurance, and devastating firepower in a package that can operate anywhere on Earth. The journey from the first crude diving bells to modern nuclear submarines spans 4 centuries of human ingenuity and determination. Each generation of submarine designers built upon the achievements of their predecessors while overcoming seemingly impossible technical challenges. The nuclear revolution transformed submarines from coastal defense vessels into global strategic weapons. Nuclear propulsion provided unlimited underwater endurance and high-speed capability that made submarines true masters of the underwater domain. Nuclear weapons gave submarines the ability to destroy entire nations from hidden positions beneath the waves. The men and women who serve aboard nuclear submarines represent the elite of naval personnel. They master technologies that few people can comprehend, while operating in conditions that test the limits of human endurance. Their dedication and professionalism ensure that these ultimate weapons remain under responsible control. The nuclear submarine has fundamentally changed the nature of warfare and international relations. These vessels provide strategic stability through assured retaliation capability while conducting intelligence operations that shape political and military decisions. The submarine's ability to remain hidden while carrying enormous destructive power has made nuclear war unwinnable for any rational actor. The future of nuclear submarines will be shaped by advancing technology and changing strategic requirements. Artificial intelligence, advanced materials, and autonomous systems will enhance submarine capabilities, while new threats and missions will drive continued evolution. But regardless of technological advances, the nuclear submarine will remain humanity's most powerful and most hidden weapon. In the silent depths of the world's oceans, these steel leviathans will continue their eternal patrol, ready to defend freedom and democracy against any threat that may emerge from the depths of human conflict. The economics of nuclear submarine warfare. The price tag for a single Virginia-class submarine exceeded $3 billion, more than the gross domestic product of many nations. Nuclear submarines represented one of the most expensive military systems ever developed. The cost of designing, building, and operating these underwater leviathans consumed enormous resources that only the wealthiest nations could afford. But what drove these astronomical costs? And how did nations justify such massive investments? The development costs for nuclear submarine programs were staggering. The United States had invested over $100 billion in submarine technology since the 1950s. This investment included reactor development, hull design, sonar systems, weapons, and manufacturing facilities. The industrial base required for nuclear submarine construction was enormous and highly specialized. Shipyards needed specialized facilities for handling radioactive materials and precision manufacturing. The workforce required years of training to master the complex skills needed for submarine construction. Electric Boat in Groton, Connecticut, employed over 15,000 workers at its peak. The facility included specialized welding shops, reactor compartment assembly areas, and testing facilities. The shipyard's capabilities represented decades of investment and accumulated expertise. Material costs for submarine construction were extraordinary. HY-80 steel used for submarine hulls cost over 10 times more than conventional steel. Nuclear fuel required specialized processing and enrichment facilities. Advanced electronics and sonar systems incorporated cutting-edge technologies that commanded premium prices. The nuclear reactor alone cost over $500 million per submarine. This included the reactor vessel, steam generators, primary cooling pumps, and control systems. The reactor compartment required specialized shielding and containment systems that added significantly to construction costs. Quality control requirements drove costs even higher. Every component had to meet nuclear standards that exceeded those of any other industry. Materials were tested beyond their design limits. Manufacturing tolerances were measured in thousandths of inches. The rejection rate for submarine components was orders of magnitude higher than conventional manufacturing. Operating costs for nuclear submarines were equally impressive. A single submarine required a crew of over 130 highly trained personnel. Training costs for nuclear qualified personnel exceeded $1 million per person. Annual operating costs for a nuclear submarine approached $100 million. Maintenance costs increased throughout the submarine's service life. Nuclear submarines required specialized facilities and personnel for maintenance and overhaul. Major maintenance periods could cost over $1 billion and take several years to complete. The economic impact of submarine programs extended throughout the defense industrial base. Submarine construction supported thousands of suppliers and subcontractors. Advanced technologies developed for submarines found applications in civilian industries. The skilled workforce created by submarine programs contributed to broader technological advancement. International submarine programs faced even greater challenges. Nations without existing nuclear submarine capabilities had to develop entire industrial bases from scratch. Technology transfer agreements could reduce development costs but created dependencies on foreign suppliers. The French nuclear submarine program invested over $50 billion to achieve independence from American technology. This investment included reactor development, submarine design, and manufacturing facilities. The program took over 30 years to achieve full operational capability. China's nuclear submarine program represented a massive investment in strategic capabilities. The program required development of nuclear reactors, advanced materials, and precision manufacturing capabilities. Chinese submarine construction accelerated dramatically in the 21st century as economic growth provided resources for military modernization. The return on investment for nuclear submarine programs was difficult to quantify. These weapons provided strategic deterrence that prevented conflicts that could cost trillions of dollars. Intelligence gathered by submarines influenced political and military decisions worth far more than the submarine's construction costs. Nuclear submarines also provided economic benefits through technology transfer to civilian industries. Nuclear power generation, advanced materials, and precision manufacturing all benefited from submarine development programs. The skilled workforce created by submarine programs contributed to broader economic development. The future costs of nuclear submarine programs would likely continue to increase. Advanced technologies and materials would drive construction costs higher. Environmental regulations would add costs for waste disposal and decommissioning. International competition would require continuous investment in new capabilities. But nations would continue to invest in nuclear submarines because of their unique strategic value. No other platform could provide the combination of stealth, endurance, and firepower that nuclear submarines offered. The ability to project power globally while remaining hidden justified the enormous costs. The economics of nuclear submarine warfare reflected the broader challenges of modern military technology. Advanced weapons systems required enormous investments that only the wealthiest nations could afford. The gap between nations with advanced military capabilities and those without would likely continue to widen. Environmental impact and sustainability. The nuclear submarine had transformed naval warfare, but at what cost to the world's oceans? Nuclear submarines operated in the most pristine environments on Earth, yet they carried the potential for environmental catastrophe. The combination of nuclear reactors and military operations created unique environmental challenges that required careful management and international cooperation. Nuclear accidents aboard submarines posed the greatest environmental threat. Reactor coolant leaks could release radioactive contamination into the ocean. The loss of nuclear submarines created underwater sources of radiation that could persist for decades. The Soviet nuclear submarine K-27 suffered a reactor accident in 1968 that released radioactive contamination into the Barents Sea. The submarine's reactor compartment was so contaminated that it had to be cut out and disposed of separately. The environmental impact of this accident continued for decades. The loss of USS Thresher in 1963 created an underwater radioactive source that continues to leak contamination. The submarine's nuclear reactor remains on the ocean floor at a depth of over 8,000 feet. Monitoring programs track the spread of radioactive materials from the wreck site. Nuclear submarine operations generated radioactive waste that required specialized disposal. Reactor compartments from decommissioned submarines contained highly radioactive materials that would remain dangerous for thousands of years. The cost of safe disposal exceeded the original construction cost of many submarines. The United States developed specialized facilities for disposing of nuclear submarine waste. The Hanford Nuclear Reservation in Washington State stored reactor compartments from decommissioned submarines. These facilities required continuous monitoring and maintenance to prevent environmental contamination. Russia faced even greater challenges in managing nuclear submarine waste. The collapse of the Soviet Union left hundreds of nuclear submarines without adequate funding for safe decommissioning. Many submarines were abandoned with their nuclear fuel still aboard, creating potential environmental disasters. International cooperation was essential for managing nuclear submarine environmental risks. The Cooperative Threat Reduction Program provided funding for safe disposal of Russian nuclear submarines. This program prevented environmental disasters while reducing proliferation risks. Marine life was affected by submarine operations in ways that were not fully understood. Sonar systems could disrupt marine mammal behavior and navigation. Submarine noise pollution affected fish populations and marine ecosystems. The long-term effects of submarine operations on ocean environments remained largely unknown. Climate change was altering the ocean environment in ways that affected submarine operations. Melting Arctic ice was opening new submarine patrol areas while changing ocean currents and temperatures. These changes could affect submarine performance and environmental impact. The future of nuclear submarine operations would need to address environmental concerns more comprehensively. Advanced reactor designs could reduce the risk of accidents and environmental contamination. Improved waste disposal methods could minimize long-term environmental impact. Renewable energy technologies might eventually provide alternatives to nuclear propulsion for some submarine missions. Fuel cells, advanced batteries, and other technologies could power submarines without the environmental risks of nuclear reactors. But these technologies could not match the performance of nuclear propulsion for most missions. Environmental monitoring would become increasingly important as submarine operations expanded. Satellite technology could track environmental changes caused by submarine operations. International agreements would be needed to manage submarine operations in sensitive marine environments. The nuclear submarine represented both humanity's greatest technological achievement and its potential for environmental destruction. These underwater leviathans would continue to patrol the world's oceans, but their operations would need to balance military requirements with environmental responsibility. Legacy and conclusion. The nuclear submarine stands as one of humanity's greatest technological achievements and most sobering reminders of our capacity for both creation and destruction. From the visionary sketches of Leonardo da Vinci to the massive Typhoon giants patrolling beneath Arctic ice, the submarine has evolved into the ultimate expression of naval power. The nuclear submarine represents the culmination of centuries of human ingenuity, combining the most advanced technologies ever developed into platforms that can operate anywhere on Earth. The transformation from Cornelis van Drebbel's leather-covered rowboat to modern nuclear submarines spans 400 years of continuous innovation. Each generation of submarine designers overcame seemingly impossible challenges while building upon the achievements of their predecessors. The result is a weapon system that has fundamentally changed the nature of warfare and international relations. Nuclear propulsion revolutionized submarine capabilities by providing unlimited underwater endurance and high-speed performance. The ability to remain submerged for months while traveling at speeds exceeding 30 knots transformed submarines from coastal defense vessels into global strategic weapons. Nuclear submarines could strike targets anywhere in the world while remaining virtually undetectable. The strategic impact of nuclear submarines cannot be overstated. These vessels provided the assured retaliation capability that prevented nuclear war during the most dangerous periods of the Cold War. The knowledge that nuclear submarines were patrolling the world's oceans with enough firepower to destroy entire nations helped maintain strategic stability. The men and women who serve aboard nuclear submarines represent the elite of naval personnel. They master technologies that few people can comprehend while operating in conditions that test the limits of human endurance. Their dedication and professionalism ensure that these ultimate weapons remain under responsible control. The technological innovations developed for nuclear submarines have benefited civilian society in countless ways. Nuclear power generation, advanced materials, computer systems, and navigation technologies all trace their origins to submarine development programs. The demanding requirements of submarine operations drove innovations that found applications throughout modern society. The human cost of nuclear submarine development was significant. Hundreds of submariners died in accidents, reactor failures, and operational casualties. The families of submarine crews sacrificed years of separation and uncertainty. The psychological toll of submarine duty affected thousands of personnel who served beneath the waves. But these sacrifices were not in vain. Nuclear submarines provided the strategic stability that allowed the world to avoid nuclear war. They demonstrated that technological superiority could be achieved through dedication, innovation, and unwavering commitment to excellence. The submarine community created a culture of professionalism and technical competence that became a model for military services worldwide. The future of nuclear submarines remains bright. New technologies will continue to enhance their capabilities while reducing their acoustic signatures. Artificial intelligence and autonomous systems will augment human crews while maintaining the human judgment essential for strategic weapons. Advanced materials and manufacturing techniques will create submarines that exceed the performance of today's boats. International competition will continue to drive submarine development. Nations that possess nuclear submarines will work to maintain their technological advantages. Countries seeking to join the Nuclear Submarine Club will invest enormous resources in developing indigenous capabilities. The underwater domain will become increasingly contested as more nations acquire advanced submarine technologies. Environmental considerations will influence future submarine operations. Climate change is altering ocean conditions and creating new operational challenges. Melting Arctic ice is opening new submarine patrol areas while creating new strategic competitions. Environmental regulations may limit submarine operations in sensitive marine ecosystems. The proliferation of submarine technology raises new strategic challenges. More nations will possess submarines capable of global operations and precision strikes. The traditional advantages of established submarine powers may erode as technology spreads. New forms of submarine warfare may emerge as nations develop asymmetric capabilities. But the fundamental advantages of submarine operations will remain unchanged. The ocean is vast and largely opaque to most detection systems. Submarines can approach targets undetected and strike without warning. Nuclear propulsion provides unlimited underwater endurance and global reach. These characteristics ensure that submarines will remain strategically relevant for decades to come. The nuclear submarine has proven that human ingenuity can overcome seemingly impossible challenges. The transformation of nuclear physics into practical propulsion systems required innovations that pushed the boundaries of engineering knowledge. The integration of complex systems into reliable platforms demanded manufacturing precision that exceeded previous standards. The nuclear submarine stands as a testament to human achievement and a reminder of human responsibility. These vessels carry the power to destroy civilization, but they serve as guardians of peace through the threat of assured retaliation. They represent both the pinnacle of military technology and the hope that such weapons will never be used in anger. In the silent depths of the world's oceans, nuclear submarines continue their eternal vigil. They patrol unseen and unheard, carrying the ultimate responsibility for national security and global stability. These steel sharks of the deep remain humanity's most powerful and most hidden weapons, ready to defend freedom and democracy against any threat. The story of the nuclear submarine is far from over. As long as nations compete for strategic advantage and the oceans remain vast and mysterious, submarines will continue to evolve and adapt. The next generation of underwater warriors is already taking shape in design studios and shipyards around the world, where engineers and naval architects are creating the submarines of tomorrow. From the depths of the ocean to the heights of human achievement, the nuclear submarine represents the best and most sobering aspects of human civilization. These underwater fortresses will continue to shape global politics and military strategy for generations to come, silent guardians of a world that depends on their vigilance for its very survival. The nuclear submarine changed everything. And in the black depths where sunlight never penetrates, they continue to change the world, one silent patrol at a time. Final thoughts. The Eternal Patrol. Somewhere beneath the Pacific Ocean, a nuclear submarine is beginning another patrol that may last for months. The crew of 130 sailors has said goodbye to their families, not knowing exactly when they will return. They carry with them the most advanced technology ever created, weapons that could end civilization, and the responsibility for defending their nation's interests in the most hostile environment on Earth. This is the reality of nuclear submarine warfare, a combination of cutting-edge technology and human dedication that has shaped the modern world. From the first crude experiments of Renaissance inventors to the sophisticated platforms of today, the submarine has evolved into humanity's most powerful naval weapon. The nuclear submarine represents more than just military technology. It embodies human ambition, ingenuity, and the relentless pursuit of technological advancement. These vessels demonstrate that seemingly impossible challenges can be overcome through dedication, innovation, and unwavering commitment to excellence. The men and women who serve aboard nuclear submarines continue this tradition of excellence. They master technologies that push the boundaries of human knowledge while operating in conditions that test the limits of human endurance. Their service ensures that these ultimate weapons remain under responsible control. The nuclear submarine will continue to patrol the world's oceans for generations to come. New technologies will enhance their capabilities, while new challenges will test their crews. But the fundamental mission will remain unchanged: to defend freedom and democracy from the silent depths of the sea. In the end, the nuclear submarine stands as both humanity's greatest achievement and its most sobering reminder of the power we have created. These steel leviathans will continue their eternal patrol, silent guardians of a world that depends on their vigilance for peace and security. The age of the nuclear submarine is far from over. As long as nations compete and the oceans remain vast and mysterious, these underwater fortresses will continue to evolve and adapt, ready to meet whatever challenges the future may bring from the depths of the sea.